boss might be taking home. We are joined now by the managing partner and the head of the CEO practice at the recruitment and headhunting firm Cooper Fitch. Jack Khabbaz is with us. Morning, Jack.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the money. And then we'll move to the strategy, the two things that this report looks at. The majority of CEOs that you have spoken to in UAE and Saudi expect to see a bonus this year. The vast majority, around 85%. But it's not necessarily going to be a higher bonus than last year. Talk me through it.
Correct. So approximately 45, 46% have indicated there will be an increase, but that increase is incremental. The sweet spot of an increase is about 10 to 20% in terms of their bonus figures. What we've seen in Saudi is 6 to 12 months is significantly more common. Probably over 70% of CEOs in Saudi earn that, whereas in the UAE, 3 to 5 months is more of the sweet spot in terms of the annual bonus.
Why is that? Why the difference, do you think?
Good question. I think it's layered to a degree. One, from a retention point of view, long term. Two, in terms of a talent attraction point of view. Three, also the value creation, size and scale is probably more significant as an overall in Saudi versus many of the organisations in the UAE.
Right. So if you are responsible for bigger budgets and having to hit bigger targets, the payout is bigger.
Essentially, yes. And also the opportunity for growth, whether organisations are going through restructuring, transformation, scale up, new startups, giga projects, and so on.
We have heard about a lot of rescaling and resizing of some of the projects coming out of Saudi. Has that had an impact on the conversations that you have had with the CEOs in Saudi?
There's definitely a knock-on effect throughout other industries. There's a really push for strong talent locally in Saudi to operate and grow in challenging environments, whether through budget restraints or through the size and scale and speed required. Both sides of the fence require CEOs with particular skill set to navigate through that.
Okay, but if we're looking at 6 to 12 months bonus for 70% of Saudi CEOs, it doesn't sound like the sort of budget resizing or cost cutting, or call it what you will, is necessarily going to hit the CEO remuneration.
Correct. There's a lot of growth there, a lot of scale up and the opportunity there. Also, it's the long-term incentive plans, 3 to 5 years, which still needs work in the region. Less than 50% of CEOs have a long-term incentive plan in place.
Talk to me. I'm going to stop you and I'm going to ask you to just define, for those of us without a long-term or a short-term incentive plan, what are we talking about there? People who are driving in thinking, what's the difference, Jack?
Well, that's if you're a CEO, you're on board and part of your incentive is 3 to 5 years down the line. You drive the business to a particular profit or revenue target set by the board, then you're rewarded exponentially for that. And that could be 6 months, 12 months, 24 months of your salary. So that's an area which still needs a bit more focus in the region, particularly if you want CEOs, whether internally or externally, to stick and add value and be part of that journey and part of that legacy piece to hit the objectives and not look to be moving along somewhere else in 2 to 3 years.
Why do you think that hasn't been a thing here? Why do you think we haven't had those long-term incentive plans in place?
I think it's growing. The data definitely indicates that it's shifting in the right direction. I think a number of factors could be, as an environment, we are now becoming a super attractive place to attract talent. So it goes hand in hand with the cycle of where we are.
Speaking of churn at the CEO level, one of the other things that your report looks at is where the next CEO might be coming from, whether or not companies have plans in place. But the bit that really interested me was whether companies saw it as being an internal or an external hire. Tell me what you found.
There's definitely room for succession planning to be at the higher end of the agenda with boards. Only 32% have a succession plan in place. So there's either a lot of external hiring in the UAE compared to Saudi, which external hiring is only 30% because there seems to be a stronger case for local talent who can operate, who are experienced in the region.
But if we're looking externally, and I mean, if I look at the UAE as well, it seems that a lot of companies think that they will be, or they already are. Is that not a glass ceiling for people who have these jobs? If you're in the C-suite, if you're the CCO or the COO, and you know that the company is likely to look outside, I mean, that's got to have a psychological effect on you, right?
It does, definitely. The competition for positions is high as it is, let alone internally that you may have your ceiling. So hence, C-suite executives are poached and moving on to other organisations, or they're being mobilised with their own organisation back to Europe or other parts of the world. It definitely is a challenge because there's only one person in the seat at the end of the day.
This is true. Right. If we look at their strategies, which is the other thing you look at with CEOs, is to ask them where they think the revenue growth is going to come from over the year. I always find it interesting in this report to see whether it's expansionary or contractionary. Are we going to make more money by expanding, or are we going to make more money by cutting costs? What have you found for 2025?
Definitely expansion. 65% of CEOs indicate growth anywhere between 5 to 20%. Two of the drivers for that are product and service expansion, and number two is digital transformation, which indirectly is tied into product service expansion due to innovation. So that's definitely high on the agenda, driving growth, and growth is definitely very positive in terms of majority of the CEOs that we spoke with.
I looked at the digitalisation coming in at number two, and I thought, is that cost cutting in another form? Is that replacing people with machines and AI?
I'm not the technology expert, but we've been around where we're consumers of technology, and what we're seeing, it's how you use technology, improve efficiencies, improve manufacturing, your customer service experience, how we consume products, how we consume services, how we manufacture, and how we digitize or how we deliver. So I don't necessarily think it's taken away from jobs, because at the end of the day, it's going to create opportunities.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning, talking us through that CEO report. They let it out once a year, and we're always interested in what the boss might be taking home. Quite a difference in multiples between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Partner and CEO practice at Cooper Fitch. Thank you so much, for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Let's have a look. Speaking of people who work